I've been in politics long enough to recognize what pressure does to people. I've watched seasoned politicians stumble when the questions get tough, when investigations close in, and when scrutiny becomes relentless. But what we're seeing right now with Donald Trump's reaction to Congress's latest demand is on an entirely different level. This isn't routine defensiveness. This is a man who knows the walls are tightening around him and he's unraveling because of it. Let me explain what just happened, because this moment is unprecedented. Congress has issued a demand to Trump that he cannot dodge, cannot spin away, and cannot simply ignore. And his response has been pure, uncontrolled panic. The kind of panic that comes from knowing that compliance brings exposure and exposure brings accountability. The kind of panic that reveals far more than words ever could. I've served in government at every level. I've dealt directly with Congress as a governor, as a president, and as a private citizen. I know how congressional oversight functions. I understand the constitutional powers Congress holds to request information, issue subpoenas, and investigate potential wrongdoing. And I can say without hesitation that what Congress is demanding from Trump right now falls squarely within its authority. It is lawful, it is justified, and it is precisely the oversight the founders envisioned. So what is this explosive demand? Congress is requiring Trump to produce a sweeping collection of documents and communications tied to his actions after his criminal convictions and during his ongoing legal battles. This includes financial records detailing how his legal defense has been funded, communications with foreign interests while under federal indictment, documents related to his attacks on the justice system, and evidence pointing to possible witness intimidation following his convictions. This is not a baseless probe. It's a targeted, comprehensive demand grounded in credible evidence of continued misconduct, even after juries returned guilty verdicts. And Trump's reaction has been nothing short of unhinged. He's erupting publicly. He's flooding Truth Social with angry posts at all hours. He's hurling insults at members of Congress. He's issuing threats, lawsuits, retaliation, intimidation, everything except actually complying with the demand itself. And the reason is obvious. He knows that if these documents become public, the entire facade collapses. Think about this for a moment. When I was president and Congress requested information from my administration, even when I believed those requests were politically motivated, I recognized Congress's constitutional role. I didn't always agree. I pushed back when necessary, but I never outright refused to cooperate. I never launched a public tantrum or threatened everyone involved, because that's not how our system operates. Trump believes the rules don't apply to him. He believes that loyalty from followers, social media outrage, and endless cries of witch hunt give him immunity from oversight. They don't, especially not now when he's already been convicted on 34 felony counts in New York, is awaiting sentencing, and is simultaneously campaigning for the presidency. Congress's demand is painstakingly specific. They are seeking documents from the period following his convictions, communications between key figures in his legal and political orbit, financial records that could reveal conflicts of interest or corrupt arrangements while he campaigns as a convicted felon. And they've set a deadline, not a suggestion, not a negotiation, a hard deadline. What's driving Trump into absolute fury is that Congress has made one thing unmistakably clear. Failure to comply will carry consequences, real ones, contempt citations, referrals to the Justice Department, and the very real possibility of additional criminal exposure for obstruction. This isn't political theater. This is Congress exercising its constitutional power with real enforcement behind it at a moment when Trump is already a convicted criminal. And right now, Trump's legal team is in full-blown crisis mode, truly scrambling. They're trying to figure out how to respond to this demand without triggering contempt charges on one hand or handing over documents on the other that could be utterly catastrophic for their client. There is no good option. They know it. Because the materials Congress is demanding reportedly contain evidence of behavior that ranges from deeply unethical to outright criminal, conduct that occurred after Trump had already been convicted of felonies. So let me tell you what I believe is in those documents that has Trump absolutely terrified. I believe there are communications showing coordination with foreign entities while he was under multiple federal indictments. I believe there are financial records revealing questionable or outright improper sources used to pay his enormous legal bills. I believe there are messages that demonstrate witness intimidation even after his convictions. I believe there is evidence of continued obstruction of justice, possible violations of bail conditions, and conspiratorial conduct. That's why he's unraveling. That's why we're witnessing this very public psychological collapse. The timing of this congressional demand matters. It comes after Trump's New York convictions, after indictments in multiple jurisdictions, after mounting evidence suggesting ongoing misconduct, even as a convicted felon. Congress didn't wake up one morning and decide to demand these documents on a whim. They're asking for them because they already know enough to know exactly what they're looking for. And they want the paper trail to prove it beyond dispute. And Trump understands that. He knows Congress wouldn't issue a demand this precise unless they already had substantial insight into what those documents contain. He knows witnesses have described them. He knows investigators have seen corroborating evidence, which means he's boxed in. If he refuses to comply, he risks contempt and obstruction charges layered on top of his existing convictions. If he complies, the documents may expose new criminal conduct. That's the trap, and there's no exit. I've been monitoring Trump's public statements since this demand was issued, and they're growing more erratic by the day. He is becoming increasingly detached from reality. He's making wild allegations. He's claiming this is all part of some vast, shadowy conspiracy against him. So let's ground this in the law, because that part actually matters. Under the Constitution, Congress holds the power of the purse and broad oversight authority. They have both the right and the obligation to investigate potential wrongdoing, especially by a convicted felon seeking the presidency. The Supreme Court has affirmed this authority time and time again. It is settled law. It is foundational. But Trump has never respected checks and balances. He never has. To him, accountability is persecution. Oversight is an attack. Any effort to restrain him becomes proof of conspiracy. He either does not understand or refuses to accept that in a democracy, leaders are accountable to the people through their elected representatives, and that refusal is exactly what has brought him to this moment. Trump seems to believe that being a former president and a current candidate puts him above the law. He is learning painfully that America doesn't work that way, especially not for convicted criminals. The explosive nature of this congressional demand isn't just about the documents themselves. It's about what the demand represents. This isn't one committee acting alone. It's a coordinated effort across multiple committees with bipartisan backing in some cases, demonstrating a unified determination to uncover the truth about Trump's conduct after his convictions. That's significant. That's powerful. And that is exactly what has him rattled. I've spoken privately with some members of Congress, both Democrats and a few Republicans. They've told me the evidence they've already gathered is staggering. They describe it as clear proof that Trump continued engaging in potentially criminal conduct even after being convicted. And they say the documents they are now demanding will complete the picture. The final pieces that could make additional prosecution inevitable. Trump's public meltdown is also telling in how it's unfolding. He isn't just denying wrongdoing. He isn't just claiming the demand is improper. He's attacking every member of Congress personally. He's threatening their families. He's urging his supporters to harass them. That is not the behavior of an innocent man. That is the behavior of someone who is desperate, cornered, and dangerous. Remember, this is a man already convicted of 34 felonies. And let's be honest about what this does to the Republican Party. They're watching their own nominee, a convicted felon, have a total public breakdown. Most of them are too afraid to speak up. They see the meltdown. They know this congressional demand is legitimate. They know he's guilty of the crimes he's been convicted of, and likely more. But fear of his base, fear of harsh posts on Truth Social, fear of primary challenges has left them paralyzed. It's pathetic. The documents Congress is seeking include financial records from Trump's political operation and legal defense fund. That is especially critical because it goes to the heart of potential corruption and conflicts of interest. These records could reveal whether foreign governments or entities have been funneling money to support a convicted felon. They could show whether campaign funds have been used improperly to pay legal bills or whether promises were made to donors in exchange for financial support. And here's the key point. Trump has fought to keep these financial records secret his entire life. Even after conviction, he has gone to great lengths to hide the sources of his legal defense funds. He has sued repeatedly to block disclosure. He has invoked every privilege imaginable to prevent these records from being revealed. Why? Because they could expose corrupt dealings that would shock even his most loyal supporters. The congressional demand also targets communications between Trump and his lawyers after his New York conviction. Normally, attorney-client privilege would protect these communications. But there's an exception to attorney-client privilege known as the crime fraud exception. If someone is using their lawyer to assist in committing new crimes, even after previous convictions, those communications are not protected. And given what we already know about Trump's conduct since his convictions, many of these communications likely fall squarely under that exception. Trump's lawyers will fight this in court. That's inevitable. They'll file emergency motions. They'll appeal every ruling that doesn't go their way. But the reality is simple. They are going to lose. The law is clear. Congressional oversight authority is firmly established. And the nature of this demand, specific, tied to credible evidence of ongoing misconduct by a convicted felon, makes it almost impossible to successfully challenge. I think back to my own experiences with congressional oversight, and I remember the frustration it could bring. I sometimes thought Congress was overreaching, that it was on a political fishing expedition, but I also understood that friction between the branches is part of what makes our system function. It's messy, it's uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Trump has never understood that. He has never accepted that anyone has the right to question him or investigate him, even after a jury of his peers found him guilty. The bombshell nature of this demand is also in the details. Congress isn't issuing broad, vague requests. They're asking for specific documents from specific dates involving specific individuals. That level of precision tells you they know exactly what they're after. They've done their homework. They've spoken with witnesses. They've reviewed corroborating evidence. They know what these documents will reveal. And that is what has Trump terrified. He knows that compliance means exposure. He knows these documents could deliver undeniable proof of ongoing misconduct, even after his convictions. So he's resorting to what he knows best, attacking, threatening, and having a complete public meltdown. And let me tell you about his psychological state right now. I've watched the videos from his recent rallies. I've read his posts on Truth Social. This is a man under immense pressure. The bravado is still there, but beneath it, the panic is visible. You can hear it. You can feel it. You can hear it in his voice when he talks about this congressional demand. He knows it has cornered him as a convicted felon facing the possibility of additional charges, and he's lashing out like a wounded animal. The demand doesn't stop at documents. Congress also wants testimony. They want Trump himself to appear before committees and answer questions under oath about his actions since his conviction. That's something Trump has spent his entire life avoiding. And it's certainly terrifying now. As a convicted criminal, he dreads being under oath because he knows he cannot help but lie. And lying under oath is perjury. He is watching this demand unfold and realizing that he may actually have to sit before Congress, face tough questions, and risk perjury, all while already carrying 34 felony convictions. Can you imagine Trump testifying before Congress as a convicted felon? I can, and it would be a disaster. The man can't tell the truth if his life depended on it. His lawyers know this. That's why they will fight tooth and nail to prevent him from testifying. But Congress has the authority to compel testimony, and if Trump refuses, he faces contempt charges on top of everything else. The legal risk he faces goes beyond the documents themselves. It's also about what could happen if he tries to destroy evidence or obstruct compliance. We've already seen in his previous convictions a pattern of attempting to hide, alter, or destroy evidence. If he tries that here, he risks additional charges of obstruction and evidence tampering, which would stack on top of his current convictions. I believe Trump's instinct will be to try to make damaging documents disappear. Maybe he has already tried. But in the digital age, that's almost impossible. Everything leaves a trail. Destroyed documents can often be recovered. Deleted messages remain on servers. Any attempt to hide or destroy evidence in response to this congressional demand would itself be a new crime, one that could add years to his potential prison sentence beyond what he's already facing. Now let's consider the political implications of his meltdown. He's running for president as a convicted felon, asking the American people for another term in office despite 34 felony convictions. And voters are watching him completely unravel over a legitimate congressional oversight request. They see him threatening members of Congress, refusing lawful demands, and acting like someone with much more to hide than what he's already been convicted of. His hardcore base doesn't care. They've bought into his narrative completely. Even 100 new convictions wouldn't change their support. But persuadable voters, independents, moderate Republicans are watching closely. To them, this isn't someone who's learned from past convictions. It looks like someone continuing to break the law and panicking about being caught again. Finally, this congressional demand is remarkable because it represents both Democrats and some Republicans working together to investigate a convicted felon running for president. In today's polarized environment, bipartisan action is rare. The fact that some Republicans are joining in tells you just how serious this is. The evidence of ongoing misconduct must be overwhelming. Here's what I think is going to happen. Trump is going to refuse to comply with this congressional demand, at least at first. He's going to file lawsuits to block it. He's going to invoke privileges that don't really apply to a convicted felon engaged in ongoing misconduct. But eventually the courts are going to rule against him, and he will be forced to turn over at least some of these documents. When that happens, the fallout is going to be devastating. We're going to see evidence confirming what many of us have long suspected, that Trump has continued engaging in criminal conduct even after 34 felony convictions, that he has coordinated with questionable entities to fund his defense, that he has intimidated witnesses, and that he has violated the conditions of his release. The documents Congress is demanding are going to prove all of this. Trump's legal team knows it. That's why they're not just fighting the demand. They're trying to drag the case out in court as long as possible. Their hope is simple: delay, delay, delay. Maybe Trump wins in November and thinks he can make it all disappear. Maybe he imagines a self-pardon, but that wouldn't work for his state convictions. Maybe the political climate shifts. Maybe people simply forget he's a convicted criminal. That's their strategy. Congress isn't going to let that happen. They've made it clear they are prepared to enforce this demand by any means necessary. That includes holding Trump in contempt. That includes referring him to the Justice Department for additional prosecution on top of his existing convictions. That includes invoking their inherent contempt powers, which theoretically allows Congress to actually jail people who refuse to comply. Now, I don't know if Congress would actually go that far with a convicted felon running for president. Jailing someone for contempt is extremely rare in modern times. But the fact that it's even being discussed shows how serious this is. Congress is not playing games. They want these documents from this convicted criminal, and they are going to get them one way or another. Think about the historical parallels. During Watergate, Congress demanded tapes from Nixon. He fought it all the way to the Supreme Court. When the court ruled he had to comply, the tapes proved his guilt, and he resigned rather than face certain impeachment and removal. Trump is in a very different situation. He's already been convicted. He's already been impeached twice, and he has never shown the slightest inclination to resign or accept responsibility for anything. The bombshell nature of this congressional demand also lies in its sheer scope. This isn't about a single aspect of Trump's conduct after his conviction. It's about everything: his finances, his communications, his decision-making, and any potential new crimes committed while already a convicted felon. Congress is essentially demanding a full accounting of Trump's actions since becoming a convicted criminal, and that is exactly what has him so terrified.